Hello, everyone. A very, very, very warm greetings from a glorious day in Arendal. We are at a very iconic venue, Madam Rygland, with a lot of people around us, and today we have gathered for a panel debate, panel discussion titled "The Forgotten People." Question mark, making humanitarian aid inclusive for persons with disabilities. My name is Gagan Chhabra. I am the project leader of inclusion at Atlas Alliance, and we have a very eclectic panel here with all the major civil society organizations. Nora is to my left. She is the head of international department at Red Barna, Save the Children. To the left of Nora, we have Nina from Caritas, and she is the humanitarian coordinator. To the left of Nina, we have Silje. Silje works for Plan Norway as a rådgiver. To the left of Silje, we have Gunnel from SV. She is running for the parliament. Hope, good luck, Gunnel. Hope you make it. And to the left of Gunnel, we have MDG representative Karine. She's also running for the parliament. We have parliament elections this year in Norway. And to the far end, we have our very own Morten Eriksen, the leader, General Secretary of Atlas Alliansen. So before we jump into the debate, a couple of housekeeping things. Number one, this event is getting recorded. It's being live streamed. So if you are watching it, I hope you get a chance to watch it. You can live stream it at the Atlas Alliance webpage on Facebook. And you can, of course, we'll record it and hopefully have the sign language interpretation installed so that people who are deaf or hard of hearing could follow the debate. Right now it's quite robust discussions happening. People are quite happy outside. We are outdoors. And let's jump into the debate discussion. My first question would be to Nora. We'll have like an open discussion. So Nora, Norway spends almost $4 billion every year on international development, which is one of the highest per capita spending. And out of this $4 billion, less than 1% of that is disability inclusive. Why? What are the reasons behind it that Norwegian humanitarian aid, Norwegian development aid is not sufficiently disability inclusive? Go ahead, Nora.
Yeah, so you said 1% of 43 milliarder kroner, right? 1% is disability inclusive, more or less we could say. But out of that, in the humanitarian aid, it's even less. There's very little Norwegian humanitarian aid that actually both reaches, includes, and listens to people with disabilities. Why? Why is your question? My opinion, and I've been working with this for at least a decade now, is you are invisible. You are forgotten. And I'm saying you now as you who live with a disability every day. You are not recognized. That's very tough, huh? I can sit here. I don't have a visible disability. You don't know if I have a disability, but it's invisible. You're not seen. You, we, or whoever of us who have a disability. Huh? And I have to say I'm very happy we have politicians on the panel because this is a political issue. We are not including listening. We're not really taking people with disabilities seriously.
Thank you, Nora, for bringing this very, very, very important topic out, like the invisibility of disability, not just from the political discourse, but also from the social discourse. We often forget about persons with disabilities, and it's quite shocking that Norway spends less than 1% on international development aid, which is disability inclusive. Again, now to you, Nina, why do you think that Norway spends so less?
Like Nora said, it's a good question. We were asked to provide thought-provoking thoughts today. I think what we are going to talk about today is just common sense. I hope everybody will see it as common sense. I agree with Nora that people are not recognized and not seen, but I do believe that we have everything we need in order to move forward. We have the knowledge, we have policies and laws, we have the ability. What we don't have are concrete initiatives, concrete benchmarks. I think the humanitarian organizations are very much willing to work on this important issue. I think they are already doing it. I know we are doing it. But I think there is a need for a whole new setup where requirements are posed upon us by donors, governments, the international community, but also the same stakeholders need to allow for us to work better on these issues. I do believe that everybody is willing. I do believe that people are not intentionally, or we are not intentionally excluding, but we have to proactively decide that this is important. We have to proactively, like we have done with women's rights and all vulnerable groups, it doesn't happen. It's not the law of nature that people are included. We have to decide that this is important and work accordingly. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina, for that important point that you have to put the furthest behind first, in a way, in a nutshell. So, like, persons with disabilities are often forgotten. And the same goes for you, Silje. What do you think? Less than 1% disability inclusive?
Thank you for that question. I would like to say 3 keywords. It's visibility, attention, and role models. In order for people and policymakers to see the pledge that people with disability are portraying, we need to create attention, and we need actually to scream louder. So I'm on the same track as Nora indicated. We need to be more visible. Actually, we must portray what kind of society we can see where people with disabilities are fully contributing and participating in the society and not hidden from the public. And secondly, I think we also must ask ourselves, and that goes to NGOs, that goes to the whole business of development. What do we mean by being disability inclusive? Do we mean the number of grants or how many people with disabilities we have reached in a DPO-led project? Or should we take a step back and look at the broader picture? I think so. I think that we should aim higher together with people with disabilities in order for naturally become or considered as a group that is especially targeted. We need to achieve a level of awareness on the same level where gender equality has achieved. And that means in humanitarian intervention, it means in policy development, service delivery, local communities, local council, budgeting, and also in people's homes. I will end there.
Thank you so much, Silje. So you've heard it from all the 3 major civil society organizations, starting from Save the Children, Caritas, and subsequently Plan, and it all are talking about visibility. And to the politicians now, Gunnel.
Thank you. Yes. First of all, I want to state that this is a specific field in development aid. Is not my field of expertise. So I take this also as a learning experience, or because for the development of policies internally in my party in the future. So this is very good opportunity for me to learn. But I think a general concern is that the perspective of disabled people, as has been said earlier, is missing in the public debate and in policy development in general. And also in Norway, we have a challenge with regards to the inclusion of disabled people in work life and in the design of society. And this is in an area we want to improve in SV. And that said, I also understand that even though it's not my government, that there has been some improvements in the financing of humanitarian aid, but that it's missing for the long-term development aid. But it's very important to get predictability in the funding and stability. And so that the capacity that will be built up it does not fall apart when the financing is reduced again. And that's something we want to avoid. And SV, as a political party, has been for many, many years working to increase development aid to 1% of GDP. And this is something we are still working with. And also we want to exclude internal aid for... there are some budget posts in that 1% GDP today that shouldn't be there. But we, of course, we also have to talk about quality and address the differential needs in the aid that will be financed. And I think that's something we will talk more about later. So thank you so far.
Thank you so much, Gunnel. What about you, Karine? What do you think about this less than 1% of aid being disability inclusive, humanitarian aid, development aid from Norway?
I think it mirrors a challenge that we have in society, both in Norway and internationally, that disabled people have not been a group high on the agenda to those in power and those with much resources and those in control traditionally. And I think there are many reasons for that, both stigma about the group and also a kind of dehumanizing view of people with disability, that they are different and that they are not as diverse as the rest of us, that they don't have the same capacities, the same interests, the same basic humanity, right? I think consciously or unconsciously, I think that there are deep rooted prejudices, both in Norway and internationally. And some of them are more explicit in other countries. And in Norway, fortunately, there aren't many instances where when you have a disabled child, they are actually locked away or actually thrown out on the streets. But you have those problems somewhere in the world. And of course, when there are crises and you have the need for humanitarian aid somewhere, of course, that's a situation that hurts those with less resources, less status the most. We know that for women, for children, and of course also for people with disabilities. So I think it's symptomatic or recognizable, but I am very hopeful for the future, because in Norway I have so much respect for the activists in Norway who have fought for CRPD and bringing the rights of people with disabilities to the political agenda. In our party, we have very, very engaged and competent people fighting for more rights for people with disabilities, and they had a lot of success in constructing our political program for the next 4 years. We have a separate chapter dedicated to this group, and one of the most important points for us is incorporating CRPD in Norwegian law, and of course that has to be reflected in the way we do development and humanitarian aid policy, of course. But yeah, we'll come back more to what we want to do later.
Thank you so much, and I cannot overemphasize the important point which you made about the dehumanizing effect, or the dehumanizing way in which people with disabilities are construed. The stigma, the prejudices, the discrimination, the ableism, which kind of pushes people with disabilities in the back of the queue in society in general, and also in development aid and humanitarian actions. Thank you so much. Morten.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the panelists for good and interesting contributions. I'd like to start by surprising you. I think this 1% of humanitarian aid, actually it's reported less than 1% of humanitarian aid is reported inclusive. I think that number is wrong. I think it's higher. I hope and I think it must be higher. I think there is something wrong with the way we report, because I don't understand how you as humanitarian actors can manage to avoid us. We are 1 billion people. We are 15% of the population. In peacetime, we are almost 30% in war and conflict. I think, and I hope, but I'm pretty sure that maybe 2% should be reported, maybe even 3%, that you're actually even forgetting to report us. And why do I say this? Because I think that's part of the problem. It was mentioned, we're not visible. No, we are not. And if we're visible, we're not counted. And why? I think maybe the humanitarian field is left with more cowboys and more handymen than the rest of development work. That means also that the social Darwinism we have been fighting in our country and our countries throughout history might not, that fight, that struggle has not come that far. Because I've not worked in a humanitarian crisis, but I understand the demands to be quick, to be out there, to deliver water, sanitation, everything. But if you then want to serve actual people, we are actual people. We are part of the people you are there to serve, to save, to assist. But then I think maybe this is the field within development humanitarian assistance that mostly neglected. And I know you have many good persons, strong, clever, tough people in your organizations. They've seen so much death, so much destruction, so much legs and eyes and ears and everything just blown away. So it's maybe more saving the healthy, wealthy potential than us all. And I think for the sake of humanity, for the sake of us all, this is where we have to really now do a lift. And the coming Global Disability Summit has already decided that out of 4 to 5 topics, that when Norway will host the summit in February, humanitarian assistance will be one of the 4 to 5. My aim is that you and the others, Red Cross and all of you, start reporting 100% disability inclusive. Because I've worked in the Norwegian society, Norwegian school. You're not allowed to run a school if it's not inclusive. If you say, okay, 15% of our, or 1% of our teaching, our school is accessible, it's illegal. So I think we need to see, and I don't think the OECD DAC policy marker is that difficult, but because it said an activity is classified as being inclusive if it has a deliberate focus on ensuring persons with disabilities are included in and able to share the benefits on an equal basis to persons without disabilities. I think that's the most relevant here. And I think that's the only aim we can have. 100% inclusive, that's the job. Will you take it? Thank you.
That's a fantastic, wide-ranging, historical, erudite remark. And it talks about leave no one behind, which is a slogan, a crying call, clarion call from Sustainability Development Goals. But what Nora and what all the other participants have rightly pointed, if you don't count persons with disabilities, if they are not visible enough, then if they're not put on the agenda, then the problem does not exist. So this gives a very good segue to, we all understand kind of now why there's so little attention given to disability inclusive humanitarian aid or disability inclusive international development aid. So what could we do, Nora, to change this? What kind of interventions do we need to somehow move the needle towards the vision, towards the aim, which Morten mentioned about 100% disability inclusive development? Thank you.
Yeah, I can share briefly how we've done it in Redd Barna, in Save the Children, because that's also been a long journey. But when we realized in Redd Barna, because there was an evaluation in 2012 that I happened to lead, but we found that evaluation was actually giving very really heavy criticism to Redd Barna, because Redd Barna targeted all children, but we did not target children with disabilities in particular. They were not seen in budgets, in plans, not in humanitarian, long-term, or nothing. So that report came down heavily criticizing Redd Barna. So when we developed a new strategy, we started this groundwork, doing a baseline, trying to see, are any of the programs disability inclusive or sensitive? Very few. We were really literally on zero, targeting all children. But how can you do that if you don't really? So baseline first, but then we started the advocacy work actually internally. So, and that was a big job. And then I was working with that, but trying to convince our CEO, our top leader. And I have to say that once we had the top leader involved, then things loosened up. Yeah, sorry. So that's why I'm saying it's like the first thing, you have to get the commitment. And you have to get that commitment by touching the feelings, the emotions, and then the minds. Because this is about, that's why I said in the beginning, it's about human dignity. It's really about, giving people their rights. So commitment was the first things, Gagan. And then we started developing the capacity and the knowledge of the organization, because there's so much ignorance. There is so much, and I don't have to tell you, some of you, because you live with this ignorance every day. Huh? Yeah, I know you do. Basically training our staff. How do we actually work with how do we collect data? Even things like when we have people going collecting midlines, baselines. Before, our staff in Save the Children, they would go around and asking, are you disabled? Yes or no? Tick, How stigmatizing is that? So the training, so we started training animators to use the Washington group questions. What level of activity do you have in order to determine the level of disability? So also that mindset, when you start actually collecting data in a dignified way for people with disabilities, so it starts there. So we had to do that, so competency building, but then monitoring and tracking. And we had a lot of alerts, because we're not done with the job. I have to be very honest to say also in the Save the Children family, although we've moved a long way, still a lot of negative perceptions, words, bad language. People with disabilities have a long way of actually being treated, I would say, with dignity also in that movement. So briefly, sort of getting the commitment from the top leadership, getting it into the strategy, then started working in the policy, then making sure that you implement the practice, training, competency building. And of course, at the center, the most important, we started partnerships with you guys. We had partnerships with disabled people's organizations themselves. From Redd Barna, we were very clear from day one, we have to work with you who own the cause. This is your cause. We want to learn from you, support you. So the partnership with DPOs have to be a demand. And actually, when we start looking also into what works in the humanitarian, DPOs must be on the table. They have to be in the driving seat, like you are doing now with Together for Inclusion. So Yeah, so those were some of the key steps, and you're right, Morten. I think actually if we looked at Save the Children humanitarian response now, it's still very low, but we've moved the needle a little bit. But it starts with the mindset. That's why the commitment, get the top leaders committed, and then you can start working.
Thank you, Nora. And when I listen to you, it's obvious as in plain sight that your organization is reflexive enough, open-minded enough, critical enough to say that we have not done a good job and we would want to do a good job. We have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And that attitude is so important. So for Caritas, Nina, like, what do you think, what kind of interventions could help move the needle a little forward towards disability inclusive humanitarian aid?
Thank you. Can I go back to Morten's comment and then get back to you? Because of course, Caritas, we would agree with Save the Children that we have done some. We have a long way to go still. But I believe we are on the right track, all of us, to a certain extent. But to prioritize it, like I said initially, it's a different issue. We have a long way to go. But we were asked, as I said today, to be thought-provoking, and I will say that I disagree with you on your description of the humanitarian interventions and assistance as per 2021, because I feel you described the humanitarian industry assistance more like it was during the 1990s and the beginning of 2000. Probably also today to some extent, but it has changed. And I've been working with humanitarian assistance and affairs since 2005, and it's a huge change. I think the cowboys have, to a large extent, disappeared. There is no room for cowboys anymore in humanitarian assistance. You will find them, but I think they are being phased out. Handyman is a different issue depending on how you define them, but we need handyman in humanitarian assistance. And the reason for the change is policies. Requirements from donors, governments, the Norwegian government, the Norwegian humanitarian strategy, which is, it's not a practical toolkit for us, but it defines how we should work, including on vulnerable groups, human rights. A lot of the policies and guidelines we have seen in development for many years. It's now entering into, it has entered since maybe 2010-ish. So I believe it's a different setup at the moment, and those requirements are becoming even stronger. So I'm happy to working within within humanitarian affairs because it's improving. But the setup of it all, we can also discuss that a bit later. But so that was my disagreement with Morten. I understand what you're saying, but I'm positive on behalf of humanitarian assistance and the way we approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. I feel the heat and the temperature rising, so I feel like removing my jacket, the gray jacket. But Morten, I suspect before we go to Silje, do you want to have a quick response to that? No, the cowboy question, because or the comment, and as well as the fact that
I think we'll leave it there because I still think it's a vital issue. But I know I would agree with you that this problem is being addressed, but it's in the nature that it will nurture a culture of kind of quick fixes that are needed. But that also nurtures a culture that can be a bit too quick on the trigger, in my words. But I see that Nora also would like to jump in. So
yes, Silje, we're coming to you. We are on the way. Nora,
okay, if I'm allowed. No, but thanks for raising the discussion. I think I would agree with Nina that the cowboy culture, or we used to call them when I worked in another organization, the muddy boots, or that type of culture, it has changed, Morten. I agree with Nina in a sense. And we're not there. But I think one entry point, which we're using a lot in Save the Children, is the accountability to affected populations. Affected populations, 20-30% of affected populations are people with disabilities in humanitarian crisis. 60% of the Syrian refugee households have children with disabilities in them. 17% of Afghanistan's vulnerable population have a disability. In Haiti, as we speak, on the earthquake. So, but holding us to account. So, disabled people's organization need to hold us as humanitarians to account. Listen to us, include us, and get us on the humanitarian clusters. On the humanitarian cluster in Haiti now responded to the earthquake. There is not any disabled people's organization around the table with the humanitarian coordinator. So I think use that as an entry point, and we'll deal with those muddy boots cowboys after.
Okay, we'll now go back to the main theme and leave the cowboys and the muddy boots behind. Silje, in your assessment, what kind of interventions could work to make this needle go forward when it comes to disability inclusive humanitarian aid?
No problem leaving the cowboys back in history. Let's speak about what we do on the advocacy side and policy side. Because 10 years ago, NORAD, the Norwegian Directorate for Development Cooperation, was focused on mainstreaming disability. A lot of energy was used on ratifying the CRPD. But I think we have to also ask ourselves now, where do we stand in terms of mainstreaming? Because if it's left to the DPOs or to development organizations to portray or put this question on the table, we will not come far, because mainstreaming, I think, is the key here. It should be built into policies, strategies, that it should be reflected in global commitments, in national commitments, and local commitments. And then we have to go back to those and see, are they really reflected there? And my challenge to us that work with advocacy for people with disabilities is that we have to look at the global commitments and see in national commitments, for example, Norwegian commitments, are they reflected? Do they pick up on the global commitments? People with disabilities, for example, are mentioned in the Norwegian Humanitarian Strategy, but that's it. And I think that is where we should start. We have a new window when this strategy is ending in 2022 to actually be more concrete. And we as organizations, DPOs, Plan International, Caritas, whoever, need to step up with advocacy work in terms of being concrete on what should be reflected in a new humanitarian strategy. We need to give actually the concrete answers to what do we do in a humanitarian situation in order to protect and enhance people with a disability, and they get the service delivery as they are entitled to. On the other hand, following up on this, I also think it's interesting to see that global commitments are also not reflected in funding. And NORAD has going through in 10 years back, going through a report saying that there is not a correlation between policy, strategy papers, white papers, and funding, they do not correlate. So we need to also go back and see how do we do our advocacy work, what works, what does not work.
Thank you, Silje, and thanks also for presenting this idea about concretizing. Mentioning disability is the first step in the documents, but then it circles back to what Nora mentioned about getting the commitments, getting the buy-in by the top leadership, getting those who are in power to agree to the agenda and say, yes, we want this to happen. We want persons with disabilities to be not left behind in the case of a cyclone, war, and the rest. Now, that is a perfect segue for the two politicians to pitch in. We start with Gunnel. So Gunnel, what do you think? How do we go about making, what interventions should we have when it comes to humanitarian aid inclusion for persons with disabilities?
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted also to go a little bit back to the previous question on 1%, because I think the awareness issue is quite important here, and raising the awareness in the political sector, but also in the development sector in general, that there is a higher percentage of people in poor countries and development countries that are disabled is very important. And I don't think that awareness actually is very present. And this debate, of course, helps in raising that awareness, but in general, it's not. Also, this means, as you have also written in your report, that disabled people are more vulnerable in war situations, they are more vulnerable to natural disasters, and also they are more affected by poverty in general. And there are a lot of factors there, but of course school deprivation is one of them, and etc. So the educational aid also has to be designed with that concern in mind. But I think working with inclusive policies means that one also has to know or assess the different needs, because there are different kinds of disabilities. So you have sensory disabilities, intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, and these will mean that you need different to address use different means. So it's about knowledge and raising the knowledge in these questions. So representation, of course, is very important in these aspects. And that's also something we work on in general in policies, in policy development, that if you don't have, and that also goes for disability organizations in Norway, if we don't have disabled people represented when we develop the policies for Norwegian politics, we will also have poorer politics in Norway. So representativeness is very important, and knowledge raising and lobbying, of course. Yes, thank you.
Well, I hear the word representation. The thing which I think of is nothing about us without us. Redistribution is great, but we need much more recognition and representation. Thanks for pointing that out. Karine.
Thank you. I think that it's very uplifting to hear the organizations talk about their commitment to this issue, because we need you to develop a good policy for the field that you work in. You have the hands-on experience, and it's very uplifting to hear you wanting to contribute with these issues to a new strategy. And I think another issue, in addition to what the organizations can do and what we can plan for politically moving forward, we also have to empower and hold accountable governments around the world. We need to also place some responsibility in crises and also in long-term development on governments to recognize this population. And there, to help with that, we of course need strong civil society organizations. We need the local organizations and to put pressure and to also run advocacy. And those can, of course, be very, very important in crises. Like you say, we need them around the table when a crisis hits. And to do that, we can't solve everything with the humanitarian aid. We also need to think about the long-term civil society development aid. So that's an important issue for us, cooperating with local partners and supporting civil society organizations. And also the Tax for Development program, which is one example on how we can contribute to empowering and also facilitating governments that can provide more rights to their citizens.
Thank you so much. Cooperation is such a key word, samarbeid, right? Collaboration, it's so important. Morten, insightful, incisive, short response.
I'll try to be short, but first of all, I think the panel now is being very constructive, and you're addressing very vital questions. And Plan, I think you summarized a lot of the points we try to put pressure on. As you said, mainstreaming has been a theme, and the pressure we now can put on that issue up to the Global Disability Summit will be very vital. We have to admit that we were sleeping in class, or we didn't have enough power to fight when they developed the new humanitarian strategy. And that's an opportunity lost. But the new inclusive strategy NORAD is developing, NORAD MFA is developing, together with NORAD, will have both aspects, both long-term development and humanitarian. And you're quite right that we have to start with the strategy. But then I'm also asked, you know, how could we make Norwegian humanitarian aid inclusive for persons? I'm answering that too. But I think you touched on very many vital issues. But I would also invite you then to this samarbeid, to this collective effort now until February 2022. Because I see this as maybe the most important event and period for a long time. Maybe we have to go back to 10, 11, 12 work with mainstreaming and the cluster munitions and mine convention, etc. But Norway will set humanitarian issue, inclusive humanitarian, high on the agenda. And I think we have now developed a good model for cooperation on development together for inclusion. It's not easy, it's not a quick fix at all, but it's serious on nothing about us without us. We realize that we are not experts on inclusion, on humanitarian assistance. We even think there are cowboys out there. But I understand that you shot the sheriffs and the rest of them. But at least cooperating and having DPOs as partners. And then I think more about the planning, the knowledge, before the crisis is there. I think we could together present a very good model for the MFA, for the new government. There will be a new government, whether so or so. And that maybe Norway can serve on a plate in February. This is another way of securing inclusive humanitarian assistance. So, you're welcome.
As I expected, it was insightful, wide-ranging, historical, and the response. So to encapsulate Morten's point, three things are very important. We are at a cusp of these are very important times Global Disability Summit is around the corner. Disability is much more ubiquitous than what we accept. It can happen to anybody, irrespective of the race, gender, class, social location, and whatnot. And since what Catherine mentioned, and Gunnel also pointed out that we are in the process of changing the humanitarian strategy in 2022, we should seize this opportunity, start a new chapter in inclusive humanitarian aid with focus on disability. So now, since time is running out very quick, this is a question to both the politicians. If you come to power, what do you do to achieve this? How do you make sure that when the next humanitarian aid strategy is being written, or when the next plans are being chalked out, when the top leaders are deciding, that we don't leave persons with disabilities out of the discussion? Start with Gunnel.
Thank you. Well, I think it's a lot about being stubborn. Policy development is about that, and it's about having enough people within our party that are really engaged in these questions and in the government, and that will make sure that it's included in the written statements from the government. And this is something we will work for, and we also have a network internally in our party that can push these questions. And also, as you mentioned CRPD, we have also, the proposal was put forward in the parliament in March this year, and unfortunately it was put forward by SV and collaborative parties. Unfortunately, it didn't get a majority, but I saw that the leader of one of the disability organizations in Norway said that she was optimistic for the future, that we might soon have a majority for including it in the Humanitarian Act. So I think it will be, and that it will give also a push in these questions.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, yes, no answer. SV supports these ideas.
Yes.
Great.
Of course.
Fantastic. Sounds great. We go to MDG, like the Greens, please.
The short answer is yes, of course. And I think the how do we manage? We have to, as has been mentioned, listen to the organizations and listen to the people with competence, be those within our party or outside. We're prepared to listen.
Thank you. Listen and then implement, hopefully, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because listening is not sufficient. It's necessary. Yeah. Quick comment about what Morten mentioned about TOFI. Silje, Together for Inclusion. Can that provide a framework for inclusive humanitarian aid, disability inclusive humanitarian aid?
Together for Inclusion is a very good start in terms of collaborating between DPOs and development organizations like Plan, like many in the TOFI partnership. I think it's thematically and financially been driving the disability inclusion agenda, especially for the Norwegian organizations. But I think also going a step forward, I think we should also think that how do we include partner organizations that we work with in the developing countries, because those are those who are actually implementing or are in contact with those who are benefiting from this. So how do they get education, information, awareness about always keeping in mind that everyone should be included, and also not only keeping in mind, but actually going and finding those that are disabled being hidden away, right, at homes, at the countryside, which they are, and we know that they are hidden away. So how it's not an issue of DPOs to do it alone. It is an issue for everyone, and also bringing along national governments, councils, community leaders, community meetings. It has to be transcended through the whole society, that they are taken out of their homes, brought up in the light, being visible, and participating. So in the TOFI Corporation, which is going on, and we are happy to be a part of this, it is a good start. But we have to take it further. And also, I think, unfortunately, maybe that donor conditionality has to be a more important issue. So Plan is very happy to be a part of TOFI, especially in Niger. And I hope that we can even advance this program with the issues that I mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. Building broad-based coalitions from the top, as having top-down approach, but also a grassroots mobilizing approach. Very important. Nora, a quick word from you about the same question, about the TOFI being a role model, perhaps a springboard for inclusive humanitarian aid?
Yes to humanitarian together for inclusion, but we need to have the UN system, because humanitarian responses, globally is very much led by the UN, right? And we have to have the UN system on board here if we're going to actually make a big step change. I think MDG also mentioned it, holding not only governments to account. Of course, governments, respond humanitarian when they have the chance, but often there are failed states, so we need the UN system on board, OCHA. And I forgot to mention actually very early on, we have the Interagency Guidelines from 2019, which are actually very specific and explains from A to Z how to actually operate in humanitarian settings to include people with disabilities. So I really hope that when we have a new government, whether it's that side or the other side, that we have a new foreign minister who's committed to actually make a step change. Because we've been talking for so many years now. We have to have a step change in making sure that people with disabilities are included in humanitarian setting. Getting a disability ambassador in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, getting a work plan, and actually start acting, holding ourselves to account, the UN systems and others. So yes, I'm very optimistic. And sorry, just a quick word, because Norway is in the Security Council for another 1.5 years. Yes. So I have to mention that. Also in the Security Council last year, for the first time, they actually approved a resolution on protection of people with disabilities in conflict, June 2019. So let's not forget that that's also a good entry point to get the Security Council engaged and holding them to account on this. And of course, a part of that is Norway's commitment also to working with children in conflict. And children are incredibly vulnerable in these settings. So. Thanks. So yes, big expectations. We're going to hold these politicians to account also if they get into getting the new minister or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Like Nina, when you hear TOFI and all these amazing things being talked about TOFI, what do you think? Are you optimistic, or do you think that it could be a model which could be replicated into the humanitarian aid sector?
We have to be optimistic, and we have to push forward for it to also be a part of the humanitarian sector. I would like to say that Caritas is on board with all of this, development work, humanitarian assistance. We would like to see stronger requirements being put on us from the donors, from the government. We will follow up on this in relation to the government as well. We are already following up on this, not because we are forced to, but because we see that we need to be concrete and specific when it comes to also humanitarian assistance. So we have set a benchmark of 10% of beneficiaries to be targeted in all our projects. I hear you. You mentioned 100. I agree. We agree. But I'm just afraid that then we will be back to where they disappear if we report on 100% inclusiveness, because that would be the approach. I think we need to be more specific. So we have started at least with 10%. in the humanitarian assistance, and we will follow up in practice as well. Thank you.
10% is better than 1%, at least. Morten, stronger requirements.
Yes, I support that fully. We work with Nora about that. That's kind of our main target, or has been up to now. But now we will also start on the humanitarian issue. But what I'd like to say as an end is not now problematizing 1 or 10 or 50 or 100. It's more your willingness to come here, willingness to share, willingness to think together with us, because I hear very clearly that there is a common will and desire actually to move this area. And we know there has been good words before in the 90s, in so and so and so and so, but still things have happened now. And with such a panel, I'm also sure that there will be some humanitarian movement that we can be proud of when we come to February 2022 and further on. So I just want to thank you all for participating, and we'll be after you.
Thank you so much, Morten, for again reiterating that, gosh, we are talking about the big civil society organizations, Save the Children, Caritas, Plan Norway, the political parties, which might be in power and hopefully will be in power from my end, and Atlas. And I think it's so important to underscore that point which was raised in the beginning, that persons with disabilities, disability is not necessarily only a case for disability organization. It is something which should transcend. It should reach out to other civil society organizations. It's everybody's business. And Global Disability Summit is not only for the disability sector, the international development aid sector, the humanitarian aid sector. It's for everybody to participate in. That's what Minister Ulstein wants. So hopefully February 2022 would be the time, and we are going to bring some change to the sector. Thank you so much for your participation. It was a thought-provoking discussion. Thanks to everybody who came. Thanks to all who were here. Thanks to this beautiful venue at Arendal, and much gratitude to everybody who is listening to this debate right now, and hopefully will listen to it. Goodbye from Arendal. Thank you.
We also want to give a gift.
Yes, before we say goodbye, of course, since we talked so proudly about TOFI, Together for Inclusion, let's walk the talk. So this is a report which TOFI we created, and it outlines the model in which how civil society organizations could collaborate. Thank you for participating. Thank you. Could I? Yeah. Oh, great. Fantastic. Sorry about that. So, once again, have a pleasant time wherever you are. Peace, love, and good vibes from Atlas and the organizations present here. Thank you. Thank you.